Good evening, campers. A very happy Monday to you all. It's Andy here with another of the Professional Humans series. A quick blast of knowledge, awareness, fun, some information, hopefully, that will give you some sort of assistance in how that everything is going on right now. It's bloody confusing landscape right now, right? Weekend for me was damn hard, and a number of agents getting caught on the hop a little bit with some options that just didn't go to plan. But anyway, enough about that. I want to see how you guys are going. Firstly, thank you so much for joining us here on a Professional Human series brought to you in partnership with Anywhere Auctions, a brilliant auction platform, and they also have a private treaty side to their game as well, which is really handy. Team, what I want to ask of you first off is, of course, how you guys are getting on out of 10. How is everything tracking in your world? Did you have a tough weekend on the front line like I did on the Saturday? Sunday was actually quite straightforward, to be honest. It was quite easy, quite a lot of fun, but the Saturday was definitely a bit of a difficult prospect with all of the auctions that I did, to be honest. I did a live after my last auction, just highlighting the need to really think about and really highlight the education around the emotional tax that needs to be paid if vendors want to get anywhere near the amount of money that they're hoping to achieve, right? So have a look back at the live that's on my Facebook page, and you'll see what I mean there. Team, I want to, off the back of that though, there's something that we really need to touch upon and talk about around our vendor collaboration. Now, this is something that was said to me by the incredible Chris Hanley, OAM, based up in Byron Bay, and he said in a webinar that I was involved with that realistically it just shouldn't matter whether the market's good, bad, or indifferent. We should just have, as agents, as professionals, we should just have a market, right, that we work in accordingly. And realistically, we shouldn't necessarily have to adjust our strategies or our thinking or anything like that, or our professionalism based on the way that the market's rolling, right? It's very, very easy when the market's easy, yeah? And the problem with that is we do become fat. We become flabby in our tactics, in our strategies, because the market delivers us the results on a silver plate. Earlier this year, I've no doubt that many of you would have been saying that either your daughter or a monkey could be selling property right now, or something of that sort of terminology, right? So now that the market is starting to make a bit of a change, maybe, hopefully, we can take this as an opportunity to nip any massive concerns in the bud with regards to your process, especially when it comes to your relationships with your vendors. For me, it really does boil down to one simple thing. It is reactive versus proactive vendor collaboration. Now, our industry is renowned for being a very reactive industry, and in many aspects, because we deal with the uncertainty of human behavior, we're going to need to be reactive to some degree forever, right? There's always going to, because we deal with humans, there's always going to be a level of unpredictability, and we can't do anything about that. That's part of the beauty of the game, right? However, when it comes to our vendor collaboration, our seller collaboration, we really do need to try and get out of this habit that we all seem to have either been in at some stage or fall into every now and again, where we're always waiting for something to happen before we make any suggestions or decide on any changes moving forward in order to improve the fortunes of our sellers in their campaign. Now, the problem with what we generally do nowadays, right now, is we always tend to be putting ourselves on the back foot. Now, what do I mean by that? Basically, gang, and this will resonate with a whole bunch of you, right? I'm sure it will. And don't stress if it does, okay? You will go onto the market and things will be all exciting and really cool because, new listing, gone on the market, dead excited, vendors are excited, they're anxious, they're excited, really looking forward to getting an amazing result because they saw one down the road go for 1.6 mil. So that means that's exactly what theirs should be worth. And maybe probably a little bit more because obviously their house is better than the next house because it's theirs. And then 1 week rolls by. and you didn't have quite as many at the open for inspection, but you still had some inspections, and let's see how we get on this week. And then next week rolls by, and you're like, oh yeah, look, we've had a few inquiries, but yeah, look, nothing quite the level we're at, but we'll see how we go next week. And before anybody does anything to affect any sort of reaction or make any sort of productive movement, we're 3-4 weeks into a campaign, and the real buzz has gone out of not just the property, but the vendor's enthusiasm as well. Because look, we're all human, right? It's like our kids. Right? We all look at a baby that just gets born. If it's our baby, automatically becomes the most gorgeous baby in the world, right? And it's the same with our property. It's the same with our castle. If for some reason as vendors, we're not getting the reaction that we want within the first week or so, we start to get a bit shitty. And understandably so, because it's our castle. Why the hell can't you? Why the hell don't you like my house? What's wrong with it? No, what's wrong with you more like? You know what I mean? So we've got to really understand the human mechanics around this, the human emotional mechanics around all of this. And the problem is, team, because we delay it and delay it and delay it, then we always seem to just suggest something, either when the vendor brings it up as a concern in terms of the fact that you've not got a result or anything like that, or you just simply have got nothing else to tell them. Oh, we've run out of buyer inquiries. We might need to look at changing. And you're all a bit, and loads of people are a bit hesitant when they're delivering that sort of information as well. Now, the thing is, what we need to understand is the anxiety is drawn from the unknown, right? And the more that you hesitate and procrastinate, the more anxiety is getting built up in our sellers, right? It just is. And it's kind of like, I watched this film, The Moneyball. There's so many good lessons to take out of Moneyball, right? It's a baseball film. It's got Brad Pitt in it. And he was asked that his assistant, played by, I think that's his name, Jonah Hill or something. His assistant was asking him how he could deliver the bad news of baseball players getting traded. And Brad Pitt, who was the GM, turned around and said, they're baseball players. Just be straight with them. Tell them the truth, and they'll accept it. And he literally couldn't have panicked more when he did it for the first time for one of the baseball players. And the guy just had to think about it. He sat down, and the baseball player, he just sort of mulled it over for a second. And you were worried that they were going to cause a reaction. And then he just went, okay. And he got up and walked off. Now, that is a very small microcosm of a lesson into a much bigger thing, which is the fact that we generally tend to overplay the emotions that could happen way ahead of time. We tend to, in our heads as real estate agents, hey, I hope you're going well. In our heads as real estate professionals, we tend to exacerbate and amplify the potential negative reactions that we're likely to get whenever we're thinking about delivering bad news. It's not bad news, by the way, and that's the other problem. We think of it as bad news instead of just the reality, right? But the problem is, generally speaking, the energy that we're putting out there in terms of the negative reaction we're likely to get back is probably going to actually contribute towards the negative energy that we get back, right? So when it comes to being on the back foot here with our vendor collaboration, we've really got to get a grip of the fact that, one, we're not paid to react to the market. We're paid to be proactive in the market. We are being paid to remove any unnecessary anxiety for our sellers, right? That's what we're getting paid to do. The result's the result. If they just wanted to sell the home, they could actually do that themselves. We're here to take control and to make the human element, the emotional part of it, a damn sight easier than what it could be if they went and did it themselves. So we need to get out of this standard sort of rhetoric and scripts and dialogues that have been around for a long time. Some of them are incredible, but a lot of them are to do with being reactive, about delivering bad news and then telling them what they need to do out the back end of that bad news, right? Now, talking about vendor journey. there's always a couple of misconceptions around vendor journeys, around seller journeys. And I always mention this to sellers when I'm talking to them as an auctioneer. Now, the first misconception is the fact that generally they tend to feel a little bit railroaded into an outcome, particularly during an auction process, but across the board, really. Once they're on the market, they generally tend to feel that the agents, the market buyers, they're just trying to get them, they're just trying to get into your house to sell and just try and get it bought. And it's just a railroaded type of process. They don't feel that they have a real handle on the direction of where things go. Now, the second misconception that they generally tend to have is the fact that they don't have any level of control over what goes on. Once it's on the market, they're in the lap of the gods, right? So we need to, as professionals, and this is what I do as an auctioneer, and this is what I'd encourage you all to do as professionals, is tackle those two misconceptions right off the bat. Now, how do we do that, right? Basically, it boils down to this. We need to light the path for our clients moving forward. Okay. Now, I've mentioned this once or twice, but it very much is a game of chess versus checkers. In checkers, we play one or two moves ahead. In chess, we're always thinking 4 or 5 moves ahead. You as a professional are being paid to look at any sort of eventuality, any sort of potential outcome that could eventuate from the back of what's going on right now, and then come up with solutions to help the situation moving forward based on situation A, B, C, or D coming to fruition in that week, right? So when it comes to lighting the path and providing options, what I mean by that is, and this was my standard way of doing it, and this is something that I would highly encourage all of you do, particularly when we are an attorney market, we should be doing it in any market, is you guys need to be prepared to do a bit more work ahead of time, right? And this is the other thing. Because we're so focused on getting each deal done at each point in time at that particular moment, we're not really acting or operating with any real foresight as to what could be coming down the track for our vendors that aren't getting sold at that one time. Okay. And in order to have a bit of foresight, it does mean that we need to put a little bit more work into our campaigns ahead of time. Now, how does that look? So realistically, and I used to set this up, and I would highly encourage that you set this up at the very beginning of the process, before you've even gone to market. Mr. and Mrs. Vendor, what we need to make sure that we do is that stay on the same page throughout this entire process. I need to make sure that you feel you can come to me with any anxieties that you have, because it's my role to try and alleviate all of those anxieties beyond the one anxiety that none of us can control, and that is what the market is prepared to pay. That is a beast that we are all going to answer to at some point or another. Everything else is something that we should be able to handle. Now, at each week, what we're going to do, we're obviously going to have our inspections, our open inspections, so on and so forth. And then on a Monday, I'll be giving you a bit of an analysis. I'll be giving you an analysis over the phone as to how the campaign's gone. And then on a Tuesday, I want us to have a catch up and discuss options moving forward. Now, don't stress. The last thing that I want you to feel is that in each week, all I'm going to be doing is telling you to change the price, because that's not my job. My job is to make the most amount of money out of this asset for you, but also for my own reputation as well. The commission's secondary to my reputation. The commission pays for the holiday. My reputation pays for my life. I'm much more concerned about making sure that the reputation's intact, right? So what I'll be doing every single Tuesday is be coming to you with a further breakdown and analysis of what's come on the market since that is comparable to us, how they're sat price-wise, where that direct comparison is, because we know that buyers are going to be doing that as well. So we need to work as buyers in that regard, analyzing competing properties against the one that we're trying to sell. Well, I then, based on that, need to give you my opinion as to how we're rocking and rolling, and then from there, give you at least 3 or 4 options that we'll discuss, and I'll give you my best plan of attack. From there, I can tell you to zig, and you decide to zag, and that's entirely your prerogative. But understand that you're hiring me to make sure that we navigate this thing as safely as possible. So in that meeting each week, team, I'll be telling them that I'll be giving them options. Now, the first option is going to be to stay as you are, and the last option is going to be to change the price. But generally speaking, there's always a couple of other options that we need to look at that might well improve our chances, and I want to look at them all with you. So the first option, like I said, it's Einstein's rule of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and hoping for a different outcome. Now that's obviously if the campaign's not going so well. If it is going amazingly well and you're likely to get the outcome, you can see it coming down the track, then wonderful, go with your gut. But then I'd always offer, as well as the price change side of it, a strategy change and a marketing change at the very least as well. It's our job to be able to utilize the maximum effect of all the tools that we have at our disposal and be able to offer them to our vendors so that they can see what tools they have available as well. If all you do is have a plan A that goes for 2 weeks, and then you do what one agency has been doing historically for God knows how long, and be absolutely hell-bent on getting a price change and a price reduction within the first 2 weeks, which is what one particular brand does and is drilled into their agents, which for me is bullshit. But anyway, what do I know? You would offer them different avenues based on the severity of how well or badly it's going. And then from there, you would also make sure, not only would you say what you could do, Mr. and Mrs. Vendor, but I'm going to tell you how we could do it and why we need to do it and the potential outcome or the expected outcome out the back of those changes that you are suggesting that we make. It's what needs to be done, how it needs to be done, why it needs to be done, and the projected outcome out of the back of that based on your experience and so on and so forth. If you lay those options out in that way to your vendor and make sure that they're aware that every week that's exactly what you're going to do, then navigating tricky waters or amazing markets or whatnot is going to be irrelevant because you will give them way more control, or at least the sense that they've got way more control, the sense that they're not being railroaded and there are options. Because that was something that I encourage all vendors to do and all agents around me to do and whatnot. The outcome of that was that realistically, there was barely any vendors that left me because we were going through every single option at all times so that we were leaving no stone unturned in any way, shape or form. And I was proving it to them by going through each part of those processes, each parts of those options, and explaining how and why these could help. Make sense? More control, less anxiety. Control only comes through giving people choice. Now, I'm not saying that you just give them the option and say, right, which one do you want to do? And then be the lapdog and go, yeah, I agree. That's bollocks. At the end of the day, you need to make sure that you're proving your intellectual integrity, right? Okay. Now, if you do agree with them, you need to explain why you agree with them as to what they're choosing and selecting. And if you don't agree with them, you need to have evidence as to why you don't agree with them and justification as to why X, Y, and Z is the right way to go because of A, B, and C. It does require a bit more preparation, gang, but it's preparation that you should be doing in order to earn the value that you believe you're worth. And I'll be honest, team, if you're not prepared to put forward that amount of effort to gain that value, then be a commission-based operator. Just focus on the numbers and lowball yourself into just being a transactional agent. I, for one, I don't think it takes a hell of a lot of effort to provide that amount of value because ultimately it should be second nature to a lot of you now in terms of changes that could be made, like improvements that we could do. You should be looking at competing properties and giving that to your vendors as evidence as to why things are happening and why buyer feedback could be coming through at a certain level. That should be a no-brainer for a lot of you. But I do know that for a lot of you, it's not something that we articulate to our vendors anywhere near enough as what we should be doing. Okay? One of the biggest mistakes that we make as real estate professionals is we don't go to the length of explanation that we should do. Whether it's because we don't want to sound simple, or whether it's because we're making assumptions on vendors' intelligence, I don't know what it is. Whether it's a concern that by providing options, we're coming across as vulnerable, that we don't know what we're doing because we're not telling them the plan of attack. Well, bollocks. We've got to give them all of the options and then provide our recommended plan of attack based on our knowledge, our awareness, our intelligence in the game. You have to go that way. This is not an industry now where we can just dictate. It's management versus collaboration. It's dictatorship versus partnership. And I'm telling you now, you're much more likely to get much more forward momentum and much greater outcomes for both yourself as a professional and for the vendor by going into partnership on this thing. They are the financiers of this partnership, so they have a say, whether you like it or not. And they are hiring you to be that professional, that will help to guide them and light the path. All right, team? I'm going to leave you to have a think about that. Reactive versus proactive. Have a think about your own game. Am I being too reactive and just suggesting stuff as and when bad shit happens? Or am I being proactive and lighting the path? Because the worst that can happen, if you are proactive and you're lighting the way and you're giving them all these options, the worst thing that can happen is that it sells before you get to execute on any of those options. You've done a little bit more work, but it's not really mattered because you got the result. Robert's your father's brother. Everyone's happy. Make sense? All right, team. I'm going to leave you to have a think about that. Analyze your own performance. Are you being too reactive? And do you need to be that bit more proactive in preparation when it comes to your vendor collaboration moving forward throughout a campaign? Have a think about it, team. Have a think a bit about your own performance, and then maybe look to see how you could be potentially a little bit more proactive. Because I'm telling you now, in a market that is starting to turn, and I'm seeing it on the front line, you're going to need to be shit hot at this, because otherwise you're going to see listings leave you left, right, and center. And by the way, that is probably the red light, massive warning, big sort of emergency warning signs is when you start to see a couple of properties start to go to other agents or start talking about going to other agents. That's when you know, that is when your clients are telling you that you are not being proactive enough. And if that happens, give me a shout. All right, team, take it easy, stay safe, healthy, and happy. We'll see you on Wednesday. Take care.